We are continuing a very, very difficult portion of the book of Yehoshua. Remember that the Jewish people under Yehoshua's leadership had been conquering and battling to conquer Eretz Yisrael for 7 years. These are called the 7 years of Kibush. And Lamaisa, even after that Kibush, there were large sections of Eretz Yisrael, particularly along the Mediterranean coast and up north, that we still had not managed to conquer. But nevertheless, we're going to see that all of that land is divided among the Shvatim. Obviously, the areas that were conquered are actually given to the Shvatim to take possession of. The areas that were not yet conquered are kind of a future right that will not yet be realized. So Lamaisa, it turns out, it's similar to apartments in Eretz Yisrael. Some people get their apartments, and some people have to wait for a while. Now, Lamaisa, in the previous Prakim, we had discussed the Chalukah of a number of areas. Eivor Yarden, the east bank of the Jordan, was of course given to the tribes of Ruvain and Gad and Chatzi Shevet Menashe. They did not. Now their children and their wives and their flocks are on that land already, but the men, pursuant to the promise they made to Moshe Rabbeinu, are still with the rest of Bnei Yisrael in terms of fighting and conquering. Now then, on the west bank of the Yarden, which is Eretz Yisrael proper, so we did discuss the boundaries of Shevet Yehuda, which is quite large. Shevet Yehuda basically took possession of the entire southern part of Eretz Yisrael, from the northern tip of the Dead Sea all the way to the south of the Dead Sea, along the southern boundary of Eretz Yisrael, and that is the land of Yehuda. And then we discussed that north of the land of Yehuda is the Bnei Yosef, and that is Ephraim, and the half of Menashe that did not get in the east bank. And the way it works is, Menashe is the southern part of Bnei Yosef, and Ephraim is north. But the thing to keep in mind, and again, without a map, it's a little difficult to visualize, the thing to keep in mind is that between Yehuda and Menashe, which is the closest to Yehuda, they are not directly adjacent. There is a lot of vacant land, and we're going to see that vacant land is in fact going to be the chelek that is given to Shevet Binyamin. So therefore, if you're going from from south to north, you're going to have Yehuda, then you're going to have Binyamin, and then you're going to have half of Menashe, other than the part that was east of the Yarden, and north of that you're going to have Ephraim. Now that is the Chalukah that was already done. We're going to see that there are going to be tribes that are going to be north of Ephraim as well. Even with Ephraim, you only come to the middle of the country, but that's what you need to visualize, at least at this point. And now we come to and in addition, so we discussed Binyamin, and you'll recall that I'm sorry, let me be sure I have the right perek here. I'm sorry, we're actually doing perek Yudches, chapter 18, and that's going to be the Chalukah of Binyamin. So let's start reading. We've already done Yehuda, Ephraim, Menashe, and Eivor Yarden, and now we're going to do Chelek Binyamin. So perek Yudches begins this way. Vayikalu kol adas b'nei Yisrael Shiloh. At this point, everybody gathered to Shiloh. So Shiloh is going to be the place, or was the place, where the Mishkan was now moved. The Mishkan was moved from Gilgal to Shiloh, and it will remain there for over 300 years until the Pelishtim destroy it in the days of Eli. V'yashkinu sham es awol moed v'yaretz nichbashal lifneim. They moved the Mishkan to Shiloh, which is kind of in the center of the country, and most of the land was conquered, although not all of the land. Vayivasru b'vnei Yisrael asher lo ycholkos nachalasam shiva shvatim. So there's a total of 7 tribes that have not yet gotten their portions. Why is this so? Because Ruvain and Gad got their portions east of the Yarden, right? So that's 2. Yehuda and Ephraim and Menashe got their portions, so that's a total of 5. Shevet Levi does not have its portion, so that's already 6 because they don't get a portion of the land anyway. So we have 7 Shvatim that are left over. Vayomer Yehoshua el Bnei Yisrael, and Yehoshua now says to Bnei Yisrael, Ad ona atem misrapim lavo l'reshes ha'aretz asher nasa lechem Hashem Elokei Avosechem. How long are you going to be lazy? It's time to divide the land. We've done conquest. Now we have to determine through lotteries as to what chelek every shevet is going to get and what chelek every family is going to get. Now it's true, we've done a partial chalukah. Remember, again, to repeat, Yehuda, Ephraim, and Manasseh have already gotten their portions in Eretz Yisrael proper, but the other tribes have not. So Yehoshua issues the following proposal, which presumably is al pi Hashem, although it doesn't say that Hashem said this directly. Havu lachem shlosha anashim lashavet. Each tribe should designate 3 people. So for 7 tribes, you'll have a total of 21 people, 21 representatives. V'yesh lachem, I will send this committee. V'yakumu v'yishalchu b'aretz v'yichtavu osa lefi nachalasam v'yavo elai. This committee, 3 members of each tribe, is to go throughout the land of Eretz Yisrael and survey the land and divide it in accordance with each shevet in order to ensure that larger tribes will get more land and smaller tribes will get less land. So the per capita division, the amount of land each individual person will receive, will be equal, because the smaller land will be divided among a smaller group of people, and the larger land will be divided with a larger group of people. Now, Lamaisa, things get very, very complicated, because the Gemara in Bava Basra is masber that the Chalukas Haaretz was not simply based on quantity of land, it was based on value. So, for example, you can have 2 people, and one person might get an acre, and one person might get a quarter of an acre, but the quarter of an acre might be 4 times valuable per acre, so the shavius is the same. So the idea that everybody should get an equal portion of land is not referring so much to the idea that the quantity will be equal, but rather the value would be equal. So as a result, every part of Eretz Yisrael was surveyed by this committee of 21 people, 3 people from the 7 Shvatim that are going to be left over, to determine that there would be an equal division. And therefore, v'yischalku oisa l'shiva chalakim, Eretz Yisrael should be divided into 7 additional chalakim, and this is not counting the divisions that are already made, and Yehoshua makes this explicit. Yehuda yamod al gevula minegev. Yehuda has already received his boundary in the southern portions. Ubeis Yosef, the house of Yosef, including Ephraim and the half of Manasseh that is not Me'ever Li'Yarden, Yamdu al Gevula Mitzafon, they will be to the north. Again, not directly north. There will be a break between Yehuda and Ephraim. V'yatem tichtavu es haaretz sheva chalakim. You shall, so to speak, divide the land into 7 portions. V'havesem elai, and bring your surveying to me, Heina, v'yarisi lechem gochal po lifnei Hashem Elokeinu. And I will draw lotteries, meaning I have the 7 tribes, so to speak, on a piece of cloth, and I have these 7 portions on another piece of cloth, and I will match the tribe with the cloth. Now, the truth of the matter is, this is extraordinarily difficult to understand what's going on here, because if the pshat is that it was the gyro, which we assume is al pi Hashem, it was the lottery that determined the matchup of each parcel of land with the tribe, then l'chaira, it's not clear what the surveyors were doing. The surveyors are supposed to divide Eretz Yisrael into chalakim based on the size of the tribes. So a larger tribe gets a bigger portion of land, a smaller tribe gets a smaller portion of land, but that doesn't make sense. If you have chalakim A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and they're different sizes, and then you have a gyro, well, how do you know that the gyro is going to match the larger tribe to the larger parcel? And if the Shvatim didn't know ahead of time what they would get, right, they didn't know what they would get. If they didn't know what they would get, then on what basis did they divide the land into 7 portions? So this is a real difficult question, meaning I'm from the tribe of Asher, and we divide a certain amount of land that's supposed to go to Asher, but who says Asher is going to get it? So because of this, some of Forshim understand that the Chalukas Haaretz here was not a fixed boundary thing until Yehoshua matches it up. Rather, the concept would be that the tribes decided that that certain portions will be hill country and certain portions will be valley country, but the exact contours of which Shevet would get it were not known by the surveyors, and only after the matchup of the Geirel do we have the boundaries. According to this, the surveyors didn't do that much. They didn't determine the actual boundaries. The boundaries came after the Geirel matched up the Chelek to the Shevet. We then determined the boundaries. So it's very difficult. The pashtus of the psukim were that the surveyors determined the boundaries, but that would be impossible if they didn't know which tribe would be getting which Chelek. So the details here are very much shrouded in mystery, but the bottom line is that through this Geirel, which is inspired by Ruach HaKodesh, there's a matchup between the Chelek and the Shevet, and now we're going to be given the boundaries of each of those Chalakim. And the Navi mentions that Shevet Levi doesn't count at all. Ki ein Chelek la'Leviim b'kir b'chem. Shevet Levi does not have designated areas in Eretz Yisrael other than cities that we'll get to later. Ki kuhunas Hashem nachalaso. Their inheritance is to be the Kohanim of Hashem. Now again, Kohanim does not mean Kohanim, because not all Leviim are Kohanim, but it means the service of Hashem. Shevet Levi was set aside to be the permanent 24/7 Ovdei Hashem, and as a result they are supported by the community with Trumos and Maisris and Korbanos, and they don't have a Chelek in Eretz Yisrael. So Levi doesn't count, and Gad, Veruven, V'chatzi, Shevet Menashe, they don't count because they already got their inheritance east of the Yarden River. Lakchu Nachalasam, Me'ever LeYarden Mizracha, east of the Jordan River, and that was already given to them. Asher Nasan Lahem Moshe Evet Hashem. Now remember, of course, that Moshe gave it to them on the condition that they would fight with the rest of Am Yisrael, and Baruch Hashem, they are fulfilling that condition. So the pasuk says, "V'yakumu ha'anoshim v'yelechu." The surveyor, the 3 people per shevet, 21 people went, and they divided the land into different portions. Vayitzav Yehoshua as ha'holchim lichtov es haaretz lemar lechu v'ishalchu bi'aretz. Go and traverse the land. V'kisvu osa, and define the areas of the land. V'shuvu elai, and come back to me. Upo ashlich lochem goral lifnei Hashem b'Shilo. And I will make lotteries in the presence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu here in Shiloh, where the Mishkan is, because that would be the Makom of Hashras HaShechina. And again, the concept would be that Yehoshua would draw a petek on which is written the name of a tribe, and he would draw up another petek on which was written the name of a particular area, this area, that area, that area. And when there was a matchup, we could then define the boundaries based on the population of the tribe. And the pasuk says, "Taka vayelchu hanashim v'yavru bi'aretz v'yichtevu el ha'arim l'shivach halakim al sefer." They divided the land into 7 portions, and they had it in a written document in a sefer. V'yavo el Yehoshua el hamachne el Shiloh, and they came back to Shiloh, again the makom of the Mishkan. V'yashlech lahem Yehoshua geiral b'Shiloh lifnei Hashem, and Yehoshua cast the lottery. And again, the emphasis on lifnei Hashem is that this was done with Ruach HaKodesh, and indeed the Kohen was wearing the Urim v'Tumim that would be maskim to the Geirel, so it wouldn't just be chas v'shalom a matter of chance or arbitrariness. Vayichalek sham Yehoshua es haaretz lifnei bnei Yisrael kamach lekosam, and Yehoshua divided the land according to the proper divisions. So, division number 1 is the Chelek of Binyamin. Vayal Gairal Mate B'nei Binyamin Lemishbachosam. So again, without a map, it's hard to visualize this. But Binyamin is punct between, is Yehuda on the south and Ephraim on the north. And Menashe is north of Ephraim. Right? So therefore, going from south to north, you have Yehuda, you have Binyamin, you have Ephraim, you have Menashe. So we are now going to give the boundaries of Binyamin. Now, as I've said many, many times, a lot of the exact location of these cities are going to be unknown. The only thing we do know is that Binyamin is sandwiched between Yehuda and Yehuda and Ephraim. And the other thing we know is that Yerushalayim and even the Makam HaMikdash and the Harabayas we're going to see is divided. Right, the boundary goes mamish through the Beis Hamikdash itself, the future Beis Hamikdash. There is no Beis Hamikdash right now, and part of it is in the Chelek of Yehuda, the southern part, and part of it will be in the Chelek of Binyamin. And those are the two things that we know. Vayal Gairel Matei Binyamin Lemishbachosam. We have the lot of the tribe of Binyamin according to their old families. Vayetze Gavul Gohalam Bein B'nei Yehuda Ubein B'nei Yosef. Right, this is very, very important. That their Gavul is between Yehuda and Yosef. Okay, that's where Binyamin is located. Vayihi lahem Gavul lepas Safona. So we're going to first give the northern boundary of Binyamin. Again, remember, of course, the northern boundary of Binyamin is the southern boundary of Ephraim. That's why it sometimes doesn't have to repeat that when we get to Ephraim, because we have this northern boundary of Binyamin, Mina Yarden. So it starts from the Yarden. But of course, there's a big problem here. It doesn't tell me how north in the Yarden does it start from, but it starts at some point in the Yarden. Okay, we'll come back to this. The Allah HaGavul El Kesef Yericho Mitzafan, and you draw a line that goes directly north of Yericho. So that would mean, in other words, Yericho, which is now destroyed in any event, is in the Chelek of Binyamin. And now you're going, it's the northern boundary, so you're going east to west, right? You're going from the Ardennes, north of Yericho, and you're going in a westerly direction, the Allah Bahar, and as you're going due west, it ascends the mountain. Again, the word V'Allah throughout all of these prakim are not referring to east-west. It just means up, down, a mountain slope. So it then ascends a mountain slope, Yama going to the west. V'hayu totza osav midbara beit oven. And then as you're going west, it goes into the desert area west of Jericho, hitting a town called Beis Oven. Again, we don't know exactly where all these places are, but all I can tell you is imagine a line that is going west of Yericho, actually north, you're going north of Yericho, and then you're going due west from that north point. The Avar Misham Agvul Luza, and then the boundary goes to Luz. Now, Luz is a very important city, El Kesef Luza Negba, but it goes south of Luz. So Luz is not in the Chelek of Binyamin. Luz is in the Chelek of Ephraim. So it goes due south of Luz, and Luz is very famous because Luz is also known as Beis El. So you'll remember from the Chumash that when Yaakov is running away from Esav and he's running to Lavan's house, he has a dream of a ladder of the Malachei Elokim, Olim v'Yordim Bo. And although Chazal say that Hashem brought the Harabayas to him, okay, that's a drush, but in terms of the geographical place that he was not geographically in Yerushalayim. He was in a place that was Luz, and Yaakov called the city Luz, or the town Luz, Beis El, the house of Hashem, because that is where he had the image of Hashem protecting him and promising that he would take care of him. So Beis El is B'chelek Shel Ephraim because the boundary of Binyamin dipped south of Beis El. And then Yarad HaGvul Atros Adar alahar asher minegev lebeis choron tachton. And then the boundary continued west of Beis El, and it descended to a place called Atros Adar. Again, this is west of Beis El, up to the bottom of a mountain, and it went south of an area, a mountain pass, that is called Lower Beis Choron Tachton, Lower Beit Choron. Now again, if it tells me the boundary went south, that once again means that the area that is called Beis Choron Tachton is not part of Binyamin's boundary, it is part of Ephraim's boundary. And then finally, V'tar Hagvul V'nasav Lepat Yam Negba Min Hahor Shel Pnei Beis Choron Negba, and the boundary went south of the mountain that was adjacent to the Beit Choron Valley. So again, that means that's in the Chelik of Ephraim. Vayu Totza Osav El Kiryat Baal Hi Kiryat Yaorim Ir B'nei Yehuda Zot Pat Yam. So again, all of this is the northern boundary that is going west, and it ends at the city of Kiryat Yarim, which we believe today is what is called Telstone. Now, Kiryat Yarim itself, however, belonged to Bnei Yehuda to the south. So the boundary went a little south of Kiryat. It went a little. I'm getting my Gvulim mixed up here. At some point, we seem to have switched from a southern boundary to a northern boundary. Let me just check this here. Okay. Again, I have to stand corrected. It's very, very complicated. The boundary starts off going west. It's a northern boundary going west. It goes to Luz, which is Beis El, and then it goes to Atros Adar. Now that's as far west as it goes. Then it did not reach the Yam HaGadol. Then it turns south. And it goes all the way to Kiryat Yarim, Telstone, which is a city of Bnei Yehuda. So what we've done is, we've done the northern boundary, we've done the western boundary from north to south, and that takes us to the southern southwest corner of Chelek Binyamin, and that is Kiryat Yarim, but not including Kiryat Yarim. And now we're going to do the whole southern boundary, going from west to east. That's Pasuk Tesvav, Upas Negba, Miksei Kiryat Yarim, and then you go south, from right outside Kiryat Yarim, Yatzah HaGavul Yama. So here the Mefarshim have a lot of problems. Normally Yama means west, but L'chaira, you're not going west from Kiryat Yarim, you are going east from Kiryat Yarim. So because of this, the Mefarshim say that the word Yama does not mean west, because you are going east along the southern line of Binyamin, which is flush with Yehuda. But Yama means you hit some body of water which is unknown to us, some type of lake, some type of stream that's called a Yam. But again, there is nothing that we know of, but at one point apparently it existed. V'yatsa, and then as you're going south, it hits Mayan Mein Avtoach, a spring, another spring, that is called Mein Avtoach. Again, we're going south, we're in the southern boundary, and we are going west to east, from Kiryat Yarim. V'yarad ha'gvul al Ketzei Har shel Pnei Gei Ben Hinnom, asher bi'emek Rifaim Tzafona. So now we are entering the area around Yerushalayim. As the boundary is going east, it eventually reaches the mountain that is overlooking one of the valleys that surround Yerushalayim, Gei Ben Hinnom. Gei Ben Hinnom is indeed a valley surrounding Yerushalayim on one side. It is associated with Gehenna, because according to a number of teachings of Chazal, that is the entry of Gehenna, because that was an area that was later contaminated by so much idolatry and even murder and human sacrifice. But here, it is not referring to anything sinister. It is simply the name of that valley, the valley of a man who was called Ben Hinnom, which is really part of a larger valley called Emek Rifaim. Right? These are familiar names to us. But here, the boundary, the southern boundary, went north of that. Now again, if your southern boundary is going north, that actually means that Gei ben Hinnom was not in the Chelek of Binyamin, but Gei ben Hinnom was in the Chelek of Yehuda. V'yarad Gei Hinnom, and as the boundary passes Gei Hinnom, it reaches Kesef HaYevusi, it reaches the portion of Yerushalayim that was occupied by the Yevusi, and then the boundary dips south and encompasses that Chelek. So here we see, in other words, that there was a portion of Yerushalayim that is called Kesef HaYevusi, the area of the Yevusi that was included in the boundary of Binyamin, because when you say that the boundary, the southern boundary, went south at that point, that means you're including it in Binyamin, and then the boundary line continues going east. The Yared Ein Rogel, it reaches another spring that was called the Spring of the Launderers. Apparently, this was a popular place to wash clothes. Again, we're going east. The Ta'ar Mitzafon, but then the boundary line goes north again, which means that area is included in Yehuda, not Binyamin. V'yatza Ein Shemesh, he had a third spring, Ein Shemesh. V'yatza El Galilot Asher Nochach Malei Adumim. And the boundary reaches as far east as the area around Malei Adumim. V'yarad Even Bohan ben Ruvain, and it reaches a hill that was called the hill of Bohan, the son of Ruvain. Very, very strange. We have no idea. Bohan ben Ruvain, the Radak says, is a person. Is he a Jewish person? Well, Ruvain is a Jewish name, of course. Bohan is not. Is he a Canaanite that had a Ruvain as a name? We don't really know, but this was called the mountain or the hill of Bohan ben Ruvain. The Avar el Kesef Mula Arava Tzafona, and then it goes north over an Arava, over a plain. Yarad Aravasa, then it goes down a slope. Avar Hagvul el Kesef Beis Chagla Tzafona, it goes north of Beis Chagla. Again, whenever the boundary is going north, that means the land that you're skipping over belongs to Yehuda. Vayu Totzav Hagvul el Lashain Yam Hamelech Tzafona. The southern boundary ends at the northern tip of the Yam HaMelech, where it hits the Yarden. Right? So remember, from the northern tip of the Yam HaMelech downwards is the Chelek of Yehuda. So Binyamin's southern boundary is the point at which the Yarden meets the Dead Sea. That is the southern boundary of Binyamin. That is the northern boundary of Yehuda. And the eastern boundary of Binyamin is, of course, the Yarden River itself. Hayarden Yigbol Oso Lepas Kedma Zos Nachalat B'nei Binyamin L'Gvulaseh Savil L'Mishpachosam. Again, I apologize for the lack of clarity here, but again, I think if you have a general picture, it'll help you understand the details. Binyamin is sandwiched between Yehuda and Ephraim. Its eastern boundary is the Yarden. It goes as far west as Kiryat Yearim, and it does not reach the Yam HaMelech. The Yam HaGadol does not reach the Mediterranean coast. We'll see other Shvatim have the coast. And the line goes zigzags, north-south, north-south, north-south. So sometimes land that would be in the Chelek of Binyamin, had you been going straight, will be allocated to other tribes. Now, after we are given the boundaries of Binyamin, which, by the way, are much more detailed than most of the other Shvatim, we are then given a list of important cities within the Chelek of Binyamin. Again, these are not boundary towns necessarily. These are simply various Canaanite cities that now belong to Binyamin. V'hayu ha'arim l'matei b'nei Binyamin, the cities, Yerichai, It's interesting why we mention Yericho, because there actually was a curse. You're not allowed to build on Yericho, but Yericho did belong to Binyamin, Beis Chogla, Emek Katzitz, Beis Arava, Tzmarayim, Beis El. Now this is a little shver, because here it says Beis El belongs to Binyamin, but apparently Luz, the Luz Beis El, it is said, belongs to Chelik Ephraim, so this Beis El is not the Luz that Yaakov renamed, but another city called Beis El, and the Radak points out that very often there were many, many cities that had the same name. Ha'avim, Hapara, Afra, Kvar Ha'amona, Ha'afni, Vegeva, Orim, Shtei Mesrei B'chatzrim. If you counted this list, you would see 12 cities, and they were in one part of Chelik of Binyamin. Then we have the other Chelik of Binyamin, Givain, Rama, Be'eros, Mitzpah, Kfira, Motza, Rekem, Yerpoel, Tarala, Sala, Elef, Yevusi, Yerushalayim. Right, the Chelik of Yerushalayim occupied by the Yevusi was in the Chelik of Binyamin, and that even included part of the Harabayas. Givat and Kiryat Yarim, Arba Esrei B'chatzreim, that's another 14 cities, and Zos Nachalat B'nei Binyamin Lemishbachosam, and these were the boundaries of B'nei Binyamin according to their families. So this ends Perek Yud Ches, and this is the first of the 7 tribes after Yehuda, Ephraim, and Menashe, and now we have 6 more Chalakim to look at.